As the global coronavirus death toll surpasses 20,400, Africa records 60 fatalities. South Africa, meanwhile, with no death toll, has the highest number of cases at 709 on the continent. Good evening and welcome to African Perspective. I'm Aldrin Simpier. Tonight, a call for national prayer by the South African President, Cyril Ramaphosa, while neighboring Zimbabwe nurses and doctors in the public sector are downing tools. Also, what does it take for us, the media, to keep you informed on the latest on this global crisis? We'd love to hear from you. Remember, you can simply tweet us at #AfricanPerspective. On the eve of the 21-day national lockdown to halt the spread of the coronavirus pandemic, President Cyril Ramaphosa is calling on all South Africans to take part in a national day of prayer wherever you are. This follows the president's discussion with religious leaders. The presidential spokesperson, Khusela Diko, now joins us on the line. Good evening, Khusela, and welcome to African Perspective. What is it about this discussion that the president had with the various religious leaders that made him come to this decision that as a country, all 58 million of us, let's have those 2 moments, where we pray or even meditate?
Good evening, Aldrin, and thank you so much for inviting me on your show. It's a great show. I always enjoy watching it. As you've said, we are on the eve of the national lockdown. It is unprecedented in the history of the country, where we literally expect everybody to stay home. And this unprecedented decision is taken because it is honestly the only way to stop the virus, as the president has said. Now, the president has appreciated that during this period, a lot of people will be anxious, they'll be fearful, they'll be uncertain. And in the discussions that he had held with religious leaders on Thursday last week, it came to be that it's important that we must show solidarity to one another. We must be able to dig into whatever faith that you believe in, whether you're religious, you're not religious, but we must create an opportunity where the entire nation can stand in unison, in solidarity and in solitude to reflect not only on the moment that we are at now, but also about the number of people across the world who had lost their lives, the various countries on our continent and across the world that are continuing to battle with disease, but also those who have lost their loved ones. In our country, we have more than 700 people who are infected, and by necessary implication, a lot more who are affected living with those particular compatriots. So it's to ask everyone to take 2 minutes of your time between 6 o'clock and 6:30 tomorrow. That will be 6 hours before the national lockdown comes into effect, and really just reflect and I think stand in unity and in solidarity as a country to defeat this pandemic.
I see even from the statement that the presidency issued earlier on, the president saying that the nation's thoughts should also be particularly with those who are in hospital, quarantine or even self-isolation.
We must keep them in our prayers and thoughts. We are wishing those who are infected a speedy recovery. We are also, I think, sending a lot of gratitude and appreciation to our health workers. While the president is calling on all of us to stay home, those people will not be at their home. They'll be at work, ensuring that they stay there in order to keep us safe. We must also remember our emergency and our security personnel, the police, the soldiers, the traffic officers who will continue to ensure that we are protected. But we must also, Aldrin, and really also thank the media. I think the president in his statement, he also expressed gratitude for the role that the media has played to send out these messages and ensure that the nation is kept informed and educated about what's happening. So it's a difficult time. It's one of the greatest challenges that we have faced as a nation. And I think the faith leaders, in speaking to the president, wanted to put that across. Now, you'll remember that the president had urged faith communities in particular not to gather in churches. And while that particular prohibition is still there, we're calling on people wherever they are, in their homes, where they sit as a family. But when you know that 58 million other South Africans are really with you in that moment. We've also called that for young people and a lot of those who are active on social media, that let's demonstrate that solidarity. You never know who may be on their own during this 21-day national shutdown. And I think it's the compassion and the unity that as South Africans that we always strive for in times of great difficulty, and this is one of them.
Yeah, and actually in that statement as well, the presidency calling on you South Africans to, when you are on social media, to tweet the flag of the country using the hashtag Pray for South Africa. So that hashtag is hashtag Pray for South Africa as you tweet and send out those tweets with the South African flag. But Kusela, as we conclude this conversation, it's certainly not a virus that only affects South Africa, but it affects the entire globe and the continent as well. And the president, of course, being the chairperson of the African Union, having cancelled some meetings that you were supposed to have attended or that have been scheduled as well. What's the sense that you're getting from the presidency side, at least, on how coordination is happening at a continental level around trying to curb the spread of this virus?
Well, indeed, Eldrin, you're correct. The coronavirus is a global emergency, and it doesn't affect one country, one continent, but we do know that as Africa, we are particularly vulnerable. While we have not recorded as high numbers as in many parts of the world, I think the statistics are only showing that it's a matter of time before it hits us even harder on the continent. Now, what the president is doing in his capacity as chairperson of the African Union is that he will be holding a virtual meeting with members of the African Union Bureau, which is obviously the government structure that supports him in his work as chairperson of the African Union. And I think that to thresh out a continental response, there are a number of areas that he has been in contact with the AU Commission on to look at in terms of, firstly, how do we ensure that Africa is capacitated, it's well-resourced in order to fight this pandemic, but also to ensure that the most vulnerable, the many of which are found on our continent, are then protected and supported. So that is a discussion that will happen tomorrow. Thereafter, he will participate in another virtual meeting of leaders of the G20 that South Africa is part of. And again, in true South African tradition, he'll be putting forward the case for Africa in that meeting, that as the world, the globe battles this particular pandemic, it's important that we always keep an eye to looking at how Africa, with the challenges that this continent faces, where already we have weakened economies, where already we carry, the burden of the poorest of the poor in the world, and how the rest of the world, especially your G20 countries, which are your most industrialized in the world, are able to support Africa as we continue to battle the coronavirus.
Kusela Tiko, thank you so much for your time. The spokesperson of the President of South Africa, who's also the chairperson of the African Union. And with that said, one of the hallmarks of the coronavirus breakout is price hiking. Various governments are implementing punitive measures, including in Uganda, where President Yoweri Museveni threatened to revoke operational licenses of those who price gouge. Botswana's president, Mokgweetsi Masisi, meanwhile, is under self-isolation after traveling from neighboring Namibia. Botswana's government has now also decided to close all borders, even though the country has not recorded any case of the COVID-19. And while in Mali, as well as Libya, which has recorded their first cases, Kenya has an additional 3, bringing the total number to 28. The East African nation's President, Uhuru Kenyatta, also outlined several economic relief measures aimed at cushioning Kenyans against the shock. Meanwhile, the number of confirmed cases of COVID-19 in East Africa are nearing the 100 mark as the region institutes tough measures to contain the spread of the coronavirus. Here's a roundup of the numbers in the 6 member states.
The East African region may have been the last in Africa to report cases of COVID-19, but it is now beginning to feel the effects of the viral infection. All but 2 East African Community member states have recorded positive cases of COVID-19. Rwanda leads with 40 cases, followed by Kenya with 25 cases, Tanzania with 12, and Uganda with 9. Rwanda announced a total lockdown last week, which includes the suspension of all unnecessary movement outside the home. All borders are closed except for goods and cargo. All returning Rwandans and legal residents must quarantine for 14 days. All international flights have been suspended, and all areas of worship have been closed. Public gatherings have been suspended, and restaurants and cafes are closed and may only provide takeaway services. Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania have announced partial lockdowns, which includes closing of borders except for cargo and goods. All returning citizens and legal residents must quarantine for 14 days. International flights have been suspended. Public gatherings have also been suspended, and all places of worship have been closed. Learning institutions in Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania have also been closed. In Kenya, national carrier Kenya Airways has suspended all international flights, while in Tanzania, Air Tanzania has also suspended all international flights. In Tanzania, public servants have been barred from unnecessary movement outside the country. South Sudan and Burundi have closed their borders, including their airspaces, even though they have no reported cases. They have also banned public gatherings, suspended international flights in and out of the countries, and closed all learning institutions. Sarah Kimani, SABC News, Kenya.
On to Tanzania now, where the Regional Commissioner of Dar es Salaam has conducted an inspection of the city's transport facilities following the introduction of new measures to try and fight the spread of the coronavirus. The number of cases of COVID-19 in Tanzania has now reached 12. SABC's Daniel Kijo reports.
Government officials and health teams inspected the marine port, Ubungo bus terminal and the airport. The main purpose of the visit was to ensure that workers in these busy transit areas are following the rules and properly equipped to effectively fight the pandemic. Dar es Salaam Regional Commissioner Paul Makonda has asked authorities to ensure effective sanitization of all visitors arriving in the country and encourage them to wear face masks. He made it clear that anyone can be affected by COVID-19, not just the elderly.
When these guests enter our country, they must get tested. Those who come from these nations. I mentioned Zimbabwe because we lost a great young man who was an excellent TV presenter, Zororo Makamba. He is only 30 years old. He caught the coronavirus on Saturday. Now, as we speak on Tuesday, he's already dead.
Ubungo bus terminal handles around 350 buses a day. Operators have been told to provide sanitizers to passengers as well as fumigate vehicles before and after journeys. Mr. Makonda said he is even considering plans to fumigate the entire city of Dar es Salaam.
Within this week, we plan to go around different areas to fumigate. Don't be afraid.
All visitors arriving from Tanzania from countries with corona will be forced to spend 2 weeks in quarantine at their own cost. Meanwhile, Tanzania's biggest airport has seen an 80% drop in visitors. International airlines like KLM, Ethiopia Airlines and Emirates no longer land as other countries enforce lockdown and global concern grows. But for now, the message here is to keep sanitizing. Daniel Kijo, SABC, Dar es Salaam.
Zimbabwe's Nurses Association has announced that they are withdrawing their services with immediate effect. Among their concerns is the scarcity of water. They are also complaining about the working conditions for those who are at the forefront of the combat of the coronavirus. Earlier on, the doctors in Zimbabwe also expressed similar sentiments. The Zimbabwean Allied Workers Union also withdrew its services at the Robert Gabriel Mugabe International Airport in Harare, citing possible exposure to the novel coronavirus. Meanwhile, South Africans braced themselves for the unprecedented 21-day national lockdown. The initial border management orders have now been reviewed. The implications are far and wide, with the SANDF tasked to play a pivotal role in mending the borders.
When the Commander-in-Chief, President Ramaphosa, declared the country to be in a state of disaster, we closed 35 border posts and we're left with 18. Now, I want you to understand very well. During that time, there was no lockdown, and that's why we allowed the 13 border posts to continue normally. Now there is a lockdown. People are not going to move. So we have taken a decision that the remaining 18 border posts will continue to allow movement of goods and essential services, but will be totally closed to the movement of people. Let me repeat this. In the 18 border posts, because I remember there was a headline about Beit Bridge, including Beit Bridge, they will continue conveying goods between South Africa and our neighboring countries, but no human beings will be allowed there for the next 21 days. Those who are coming into South Africa, we are aware that there are many nationals in our neighboring country who get health care from South Africa. They will make a special arrangements with Home Affairs to come and make use of our health services, both public and private. So it will be a special arrangement. Otherwise, ordinarily, there will be no movement of people around our borders.
Minister of Home Affairs has shut down some of the ports of entry. Minister of Transport has announced that there are some ports where air, land, and maritime ports are being shut down. And in this instance, the SANDF will ensure that there are no unauthorized entries at the closed ports of entries during this lockdown. The South African Military Health Services, as mentioned by the President under Essential Services, will continue to work together with all health authorities under the direction of the Minister of Health to provide essential health services to public through its health practitioners. A team of the South African National Army, in conjunction with the provincial joint operation centers and other state departments, will deploy static guards at quarantine sites, delivery points, and mass storage facilities.
Sanibonani, nginguzweli Mkhize ngqongqoshe wezempilo kuzwelonke. Isifo se-coronavirus sesifikile eNingizimu Afrika. Akekho kufanele amangale noma ethuke. INingizimu Afrika imi ngomumo ukubhekana nalesimo esiphuthumayo. Asikho isidingo sokwethuka. Odokotela nabahlengikazi bakulelizwe baqeqeshwe banolwazi olwanele ukubhekana negciwane i-COVID-19. Umaphesenti ayi-82 e-COVID-19 abaguli kakhulu. Abantu baba nokushisa komzimba kancane, ukucobeka noma kwenzeke bakhwehlela. Amaphesenti ayi-6 kuphela lapho kudingeka khona baye egunjini labagula kakhulu. Iningi labantu lingazigulela lize lilulame lingazange lilaliswe ezibhedlela. Uma ukhathazeke ngempela ngezimpawu onazo, sicela uye emtholampilo noma kudokotela noma ufonele inombolo kawonke esebenza imini nobusuku u-0800 029 999. Nazi izeluleko ezibalulekile. Geza izandla. Zigeze ngaphambi kokupheka, ngaphambi kokudla, emva kokuya endlini encane, uma uthimula, uma ukhwehlela noma unakekela abagulayo. Sebenzisa insipho namanzi noma usebenzisa imithi uketshezi ebulala amagciwane. Okanye ungathintani nabantu abagulayo. Zama ukugwema ukuthinta amehlo akho, ikhala nomlomo. Hlala ekhaya uma uzizwa unomkhuhlane, khwehlelela noma uthimulele endololwaneni noma kwithishu bese uyayilahla leyo thishu. Gcina izindawo ezithintwa njalo ngesibulala magciwane zihlanzekile. Khumbulani ukuthi i-COVID-19 isifo esiphatha noma ubani, asibandlululi, nawe ke ungabandlululi abanalesifo. Nobani singamngena kodwa singasinqoba. Ngiyabonga.
On set, Trans Travel, scene 1, take 1.
At Trans Travel, we love traveling. What if I told you we'll be traveling back into time? Yes, back to the 1950s.
We are here today to explore. I never miss an opportunity to get involved.
But let me get my cameraman to actually help me find out who's upside down between me and the house.
I think one of the best things to do when you are here at the Eye is to dive.
I'm here to learn how to make home combo. And it's a wrap.
Taking a look at how the youth consume news.
I prefer using social networks for information.
I happen to find reading news on my cell phone more convenient than reading news in newspapers.
I do follow various news sites there, and I get the links to the news articles that I read every single day.
I prefer using the net to watch to get the news because of it's convenient.
Watch Media Monitor Sundays at 9 a.m.
An absolute decimation on the whole share index.
Stock's feeling an enormous amount of pain. I think a lot of people are very concerned.
We already expect the Reserve Bank to act aggressively.
Don't over-pressurize them. Leave the conversation to me and the governor of the South African Reserve Bank.
Meter taxi drivers, you find them a lot when you come out from their arrivals. They say business today particularly has been very bad, and they're very concerned.
Welcome back. COVID-19 is a challenging time for journalists to deal with both misinformation and scientific information. Is the coronavirus the biggest story we've ever seen? And if so, how do media practitioners deal with it? I'm now joined on the line by our SABC correspondent, Musa Wicker, who's joining us from Zimbabwe, as well as Showan Bryce-Peace, who joins us from New York. Showan, let me start off with you. Good evening and welcome to African Perspective. What's a normal morning for you now that things have changed? So you wake up in the morning, what happens now?
I walk 10 paces to my office, Aldrin, and I consider whether I should brush my teeth before I start working or not. I mean, these are literally the realities that we are facing. We're not allowed to leave our homes except for solitary exercise or for, going to do essential business like going to the bank. So if you need to fill up your car or if you have a medical emergency. I start working very early in the day because there's just so much information coming from different parts of this country, let alone the world. I mean, the United States is a country of 330 million people with 50 states and territories around the world. And so this is a very big story, and my responsibility, certainly on SABC News, is very much to give a broad perspective of how this is happening. The fortunate thing is I'm based in New York City, in Manhattan, and this is now the epicenter of this virus. So in that sense, our location is really, really very important here.
So from journalists who work in New York, in the USA as well, are there restrictions that have been put in place even on journalists? Because what we find here in South Africa, and this was just now during the press briefing as well, is that media houses are listed as part of the enabling services to help curb the spread of the virus. What's it like in New York?
Yeah, people are working from home. People are, or in television, for example, they will do a live shot, but you won't see any guests as part of that live shot. So journalists are working in isolation, and if they are out in the field, they are certainly taking various precautions that have been instituted by the state in terms of social distancing, at least 2 meters away from people. The difference between the lockdown in South Africa and what we are seeing in the United States, California has a lockdown, New Jersey has a lockdown, we have a stay-at-home order, is that you are still allowed to go outside, but to do solitary activities like going for a run or walking your dog. But interactions are the problem, getting too close to people. And this has been a problem in terms of enforcement in New York, is you see people playing basketball, this is leisure time, people sitting and having picnics. That was not the intention of the outside allowance. This is to allow people just to go and, get some fresh air. And in terms of mental health, very, very important. But journalists, just to answer your question, are working from home. They are working solitarily. And if they happen to be outside, for example, television journalists, they are working by themselves in terms of not really interacting with too many guests.
Okay, let's go to our Nigeria correspondent, Phil Iza, who's joining us from Abuja. Good evening, Phil, and welcome to African Perspective. I'm going to ask you as well the question that I asked Showan earlier on. What's life for a journalist now, like waking up in the morning and having to cover this particular story, and also considering all the various levels of restrictions that have been imposed?
Well, thank you. In Nigeria, for journalists, many.
Well, thank you. In Nigeria, for journalists,
day-to-day activities.
the day-to-day activities.
The day-to-day activities are still on for most people, just that is in a different turn. It's a twist of events because most offices, are locked, shut down. Public places, the government offices also, most of them are shut down as measures to contain the coronavirus. Now, just like he said in New York, in Nigeria, many journalists are also looking at alternative ways of covering stories. Observing precautionary measure. When they go out to when they have to cover stories. Of course, people are observing social distance, and even more, the awareness is growing by the day. And so if you have to do interviews and all of that, you have to ensure that you have all the necessary precautions on. Like the face masks and the hand gloves and all of that. But then, people are still looking at different angles of telling the story, especially with the efforts and updates from the government on how they're tackling the spread of tackling or containing the spread of the coronavirus. Of course, some updates are coming in from the government, but even government officials have had to change their mode of communication. For example, the NCDC has set up a microsite where it updates periodically on the development in terms of the new cases, recovered cases and all of that. So yes, indeed, we're evolving just as the coronavirus in Nigeria is being contained.
Okay, Phil, so we'll get to the technical stuff just a bit later on, but I want to ask you personally as a journalist as well, and having to interact with some of your sources, and you spoke about having the mask and having the gloves, but do you sometimes fear for your life at all?
Well, of course, the concern for safety is one of the major things that all journalists have, especially that also, that has also concerns me, my colleague in Abuja. But, the burden of having to tell the stories, the passion also somehow evens out the fear of losing your life. As long as you can observe the necessary precautions. For example, I don't go out without the face mask. I don't go out without my hand gloves. In fact, I have a handy sanitizer always on in my pocket. We also have in our car when we drive. So, those precautionary measures are maintained. Also, we try to stay ahead by getting information on contact tracing. Where, for example, if we're going to a location, we try to find out if there are any suspected cases at all in that area. Has the government announced any or reported any case close to that area? So we're just trying to keep ourselves as safe as possible. And then, of course, when we go home, we ensure that we maintain proper hygiene, just so that we don't extend it to family and loved ones at home.
Sherwin, is that the same for you? We'll go to effort in just a moment, but is that the same for you, considering that where you are right now, New York being considered the epicenter of the virus in the United States?
Yeah, there's a very big sense of awareness, certainly in the United States, particularly here in New York. My colleague in Nigeria correctly points out that any time you go outside, if you're touching surfaces or if you're going to grocery stores or anything of the like, the first thing you have to do is get home, wash your hands, and take a shower and put those clothes aside. So they're very basic but scientific guidance that one can follow, even as a journalist. But look, we are not able to do the work that we were doing before this virus hit us. We are not in our offices. We're not in newsrooms. We're not interacting with our colleagues. And I think this is a completely ball game, and we are continuing day by day to figure out how to do this better as we get more experience with it. For example, once the lockdown was announced in South Africa, we talked to citizens in South Africa on WhatsApp and on social media and said to them, look, send us your videos. We don't want to bring a microphone and stick it in your face to get your reaction, so you're going to have to play your part too. So I think we're going to see a lot of citizen journalism come to the fore, and it's going to be this new paradigm, really, that we all are going to have to come to terms with, Alvin.
Let's go to Effort Musikiwa, who's joining us from Zimbabwe. Effort, for you, and I know that you have been working solo for a very long time, so now you'll also be probably being forced to try and become more innovative around how you put together these packages, considering that there's also this issue around the social distancing. Hi, Effort, can you hear me?
Well, for Zimbabwe, it's very interesting, Audrey, in that there are no restrictions that have been put in place at the moment. We are still also learning from what others are doing in their different parts of the world. But like what Sherwin was trying to highlight, a lot of journalists are actually trying to get information, trying to learn from how some of us have been able to, operate as individuals. Some of us have been able to build stories even at times when you can't get access to certain areas, but you still manage to get information, you still manage to get contacts. So it's a different experience. We might be ahead, but when it comes to the COVID-19, remember, Zimbabwe is behind. So the methods are still being developed. People are still learning. It's still new to everyone. That's what I can say, Audrey.
Yeah. From your experience working during the time of former President Robert Mugabe, of course, there were a lot of restrictions around the media. Do you think at all, from that experience that you have gained, that has helped and assist you in how you report the story now? Because there are, for instance, in countries like South Africa, there are the restrictions that are in place, but you're saying in Zimbabwe there are no restrictions, but you know about how the virus spread, so I'm sure you're taking your own precautionary measures. Hi, Effort, can you hear me? Effort, can you hear me? Okay, we're struggling there with that line with Effort. We're going to try and re-establish it. Phil, earlier on you mentioned the issue around getting details that are quite important to telling this particular story. And there's also this issue around fake news. How difficult has it been to report on this virus, the novel coronavirus, but also trying to discern what is fact and what is fiction?
Yes, I can hear you.
Phil, can you hear me? Okay, we seem to have some problems with those lines. Let's try with Sherwin Bryce-Peace, who's joining us from New York. Sherwin, I'm sure the technology in New York certainly is much better. Probably that's the reason why you can hear everybody, but we're struggling with the other guys who are neighboring guys. But anyway, trying to get all of this information, because you have the doctors as well, and then you have the president, the US president, who comes out and speaks out of turn, and some people ask, where does he get all this information from? And having to work around the facts and also trying to isolate and quarantine the fiction.
Yeah, this is not a new ball game for some of us, Aldrin. I mean, we've been dealing with alternative facts and fake news since the presidency of Donald Trump took office in January of 2017. So when it comes to COVID-19, I mean, we don't have to recalibrate and readjust our perspectives and how we react to misinformation out there. We are pretty well versed in what is real and what is not, certainly from my perspective as a journalist. But follow the facts. Always look at news resources that are established. I mean, in South Africa, you would tune into the SABC or ENCA, or what the credible news organizations are. Here, it's the New York Times or various cable news channels or NBC. You have to sift through the nonsense out there. And I think the disinformation out there is not coming from journalists. Everybody's a journalist these days. You see politicians breaking news. You see my mother tweeting all sorts of things. So, follow the journalists, identify who your sources are, and then stick with those. But there's a lot of information out there. And so if you often you can choose to be confused or not. And by following established news sources, I mean, this is an old game that we've been playing. So stick to the facts, follow established news organizations, and you'll be fine.
Okay, let's try again that line with Effort. Effort, if you can hear us. So what we're trying to discern now is, with all the information that is coming through, at least from Zimbabwe as well as Zimbabwe's government officials, and you said that earlier on there are no regulations that have been put in place because Zimbabwe is certainly new to some of these things and some of the information that is coming through, and also looking at other countries. Do you find at all that it's difficult to get some of the facts from government and the information that is flowing from the state?
Well, for a change, the Zimbabwean government has been forthcoming with certain information, in as much as they might delay in providing it, but they will, at the end of the day, release the information so that we actually do get the facts and the figures. We actually do get to understand what is happening. But like what Sherwin just mentioned, that everyone has become a journalist. You have social media where everyone posts reports or stories that are unfounded. Someone just thinks of a story, posts it on social media, and the whole world believes it. And we have to go through all the steps of trying to make sure that we verify whether the story is credible, whether there is any truth to that story. So really, it's an interesting time that we are living in, and trying to get the right information out, trying to make sure that we also don't spread either the fear or the misinformation is what we are actually learning to do and keep doing every day and every time, so that people, both in Zimbabwe, people out there in the world, everyone gets to know the real facts and the real stories that are happening on the ground.
And how do you do that? How do you make... Sorry, Sherwin, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to add, Aldrin, that, there's fake news, but there's also miscommunication. And I think that's also a very big issue that we need to address. If you look at the lockdown announcement, various ministers from various clusters coming out to talk to South Africans, initially the health minister, I believe, said that you would be able to walk outside and go for a jog and walk your dog. And then the police minister came later and said that would not be the case. So communication from officials is also a very important factor. You mentioned Donald Trump. His motives are unknown, but I think we need to be very careful about what we are communicating to people and how we are communicating, especially in times of heightened anxiety and frustration and the imposition of new burdens on people. For example, parents with kids at home right now, they want accurate information. So government also, I think, has a big responsibility here to get their information out in the correct manner the first time, because this sort of confusion doesn't help when people are anxious and panicking already.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right, Effort, is that at the moment you have doctors in Zimbabwe who said that they're withdrawing the services, nurses also downing the tools. How do you report on that particular story while also trying to make sure that you don't spread fear and anxieties around Zimbabweans?
Well, it's a balancing act, Aldrin. The doctors, you still have to speak to them, and remember, their concerns are genuine. Everyone is afraid of this disease. And when they do raise issues or when they do take certain actions, you have to be very mindful that you report, so that at the end of the day, it's not to cause alarm, it's not to make people panic, but actually to report what is on the ground. You have to make sure that you balance, you get all the facts, you get all the comments from all the sides. We've been actually trying to get hold of the health minister to give us a comment, and luckily he obliged. He went on national TV to address, to say that, these concerns that are being raised by the doctors, yes, they are genuine, and that the government is actually doing something. He also mentioned that they've actually received a consignment from Jack Ma, and they've also, as a government, they put in some funds that they actually acquired their own protective equipment. So that story, as it developed earlier on, we only had the doctors speaking, and there was panic. Now the health minister has managed to respond. So these are the balancing acts that we have to do on a daily basis to make sure that we get the story out there, and we get so that everyone is well informed of what is actually transpiring.
Okay, so we're going to go to a quick ad break. When we come back, what does the future hold for the way you and my fellow panelist over here report on what you should know about the coronavirus, but also any other detail in relation to current affairs beyond COVID-19.
Started on set. Trends travel. Scene 1, take 1.
At Trends Travel, we love traveling. What if I told you we'll be traveling back into time? Yes, back to the 1950s.
We are here today to explore. I never miss an opportunity to get involved.
But let me get my cameraman to actually help me find out who's upside down between me and the house.
I think one of the best things to do when you are here at the Eye is to dive.
I'm here to learn how to make home combo. And it's a wrap.
Did you know that Victoria Falls is a waterfall in southern Africa on the Zambezi River? At the border between Zambia and Zimbabwe, Scottish missionary and explorer David Livingstone is believed to have been the first European to view Victoria Falls on 16th November 1855 from what is known as Livingstone Island. Livingstone named the discovery in honor of Queen Victoria of Britain. The Victoria Falls are also called Musa Wicker, or the smoke that thunders.
It is the biggest story that the globe is currently facing, and that is COVID-19, as various governments grapple with what to do and how to respond to COVID-19 to try and contain the spread of the virus. He's speaking to our correspondents, one in Zimbabwe, one in Nigeria, and also in the United States, about how difficult it has become to report on COVID-19, but also all the information that you need to know and trying to make sure that you are COVID ready. Let's go back to Phil. Phil, quick one on what we've seen in Nigeria is that there are some people who have said to be using the malaria drugs to try and help themselves, I don't know, as a vaccine against the COVID-19. How was the reporting around that, and also the messaging that was coming from the health authorities that there is no vaccine for COVID-19?
Well, thank you, Adrian. Indeed, it's been news for the past few days that many Nigerians have been opting for the use of chloroquine, to treat themselves and prevent themselves against contracting the coronavirus. But the health authorities, government officials have come out really strongly to advise against it, especially in Lagos State, where Nigeria has recorded its highest number of cases so far of coronavirus. We see a lot of people, of course, the government has been periodically informing, disseminating information about the cases, the number of people that the government is looking to trace, about 1,800. So a lot of people have, initially the news from the government was that hospitals were already treating them, for overdose on that drug. Of course, you remember or recall that the U.S. president had said that people could consider, but then one would expect that except by prescription from health authorities, people would not just go about using that drug. But panic and confusion made people to opt for that drug. But the government officials have come out strongly to advise against that, and we've seen a reduction in that aspect. But then more people are saying that proper information should drill down to even the lowest in the cadre of people in the country, especially looking at the low-income earners, petty traders, people who are the illiterate, people who don't understand, statements from the government, official statements from the government. And so conventional methods of communication have been advised, that the government should adopt so that information can be disseminated across all borders, all board, talking about the elites and, of course, the rural areas. And we're hoping that the government put that in place through its information ministry to disseminate information properly. Maybe we won't have those kind of cases that you mentioned again.
Phil, thank you so much for your time. Let's move over to Showan. Showan, this has been this whole debate as well around the vaccine trial in the USA, and we saw that Germany really getting angry at apparent exclusive rights that the United States wanted around this particular vaccine. The reporting around this as well, and just quickly touch on this battle between the US as well as the Chinese government around who is to blame for this coronavirus.
Well, I will just go back to the earlier conversation about the malaria drug, right? This combination of hydrochloroquine and Zithromax that was put out there by the United States president. And immediately journalists asked other health officials in the room about this therapy. And they were saying, the health officials immediately said that they had not conducted any vaccines. It has shown some promise in other countries, but they needed to conduct their own trials, something that is now happening. I can tell you that an Arizona man and his wife consumed some of this drug. Apparently it's used in fish tank cleaner, the chloroquine is, and after hearing the president, they consumed this drug sort of almost as a preventative measure for them possibly getting COVID-19. The man has died and his wife is now in hospital. So let us follow the science and let us follow the science. The president is not a board certified medical doctor and should not have been making statements like that. There's a real danger when people start talking about the science that they're not educated on. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, look, the president of the United States has been crossing out the coronavirus on his speeches and calling it the Chinese virus. And I think that was a response to the pressure that he was feeling from various states, various governments in California and in New York in particular, at the slow response from the federal government. This is when the heat was on for the president, and suddenly he came out and called it he would actually preface it, Aldrin, by saying, this is no one's fault, but then calling it the Chinese virus. And when he has been confronted on this by journalists at the White House briefings, his response is, well, it came from China.
Mm-hmm. And then just quickly on Germany, really quickly.
The question on Germany is, well, is this the fight about some of the
vaccine? Yes, and exclusive rights.
My understanding is that the EU government has put a lot of money into that company, and they will be staying there. The US government has denied that they were making an approach to this government, to this company that was developing certain treatments leading to a vaccine. But look, a vaccine is 12 to 18 months away. There's a trial that has started, the first trial, I believe, that started in the United States. We're a long way away. So social distancing is going to be key to bring down the curve, Aldrin.
Okay, then. Thank you so much, Showan Bryce-Peace, as well as Effort. We've come to the end of that particular conversation, but we're going to take it just a step further after the break.
An absolute decimation on the whole share index.
Stock's feeling an enormous amount of pain. I think a lot of people very concerned.
We already expect the Reserve Bank to act aggressively.
Don't over-pressurize them. Leave the conversation to me and the governor of the South African Reserve Bank.
Meter taxi drivers, you find them a lot when you come out from their arrivals. They say business today particularly has been very bad and they're very concerned.
Well, as we indicated earlier on, that South Africa has become the epicenter of the COVID-19 virus in the continent or on the continent. However, though, with 709 cases, the country is yet to report a death. Joining me now is SABC foreign editor Sophie Mokoena to speak more about this. Quite interesting looking at South Africa becoming the epicenter this morning with the announcement of the 709 cases. But on the continent itself, we are seeing that there are over 2,000 confirmed cases and 64 deaths.
Yes, let's start with the North Africa. When you look at North Africa, you have 953 cases spreading across different countries. But there you have Egypt as an epicenter of North Africa. You go to Central Africa, you have 145 cases, and Cameroon there being an epicenter in Central Africa at 70. East Africa, you have 193, Rwanda leading with 40. And then, of course, West Africa, you have 444, and Burkina Faso leading with 114. Coming to SADC, SADC is a problem. South Africa with 709 out of 740. And therefore, it speaks to the fact that South Africa is the epicenter on the continent, in the region. We know that Gauteng province, the epicenter in South Africa.
And the WHO also warning last week already that with poor health infrastructure, it will become even more difficult for the continent to try and contain the spread of the virus. And also we've heard, as Effort was saying now as well, that the likes of Jack Ma stepping in to try and assist the countries.
Yes, indeed, Jack Ma donating protective gear, some masks, and a lot of stuff to assist particularly those countries that have poor health system. And when you look at the message from the World Health Organization, the director of World Health Organization has called on member countries of the UN in general to work together. Let's take a listen at what he had to say today.
We have overcome many pandemics and crises before. We will overcome this one too. The question is how large a price we will pay. Already we have lost more than 16,000 lives. We know we will lose more. How many more will be determined by the decisions we make and the actions we take now. To slow the spread of COVID-19, many countries have contributed or introduced unprecedented measures at significant social and economic cost, closing schools and businesses, cancelling sporting events, and asking people to stay home and stay safe. We understand that these countries are now trying to assess when and how they will be able to ease these measures. The answer depends on what countries do while these population-wide measures are in place. Asking people to stay at home and shutting down population movement is buying time and reducing the pressure on health systems. But on their own, these measures will not extinguish epidemics. The point of these actions is to enable the more precise and targeted measures that are needed to stop transmission and save lives. The question is...
And just listening to that is a very important conversation to be had around what other member states are also doing to try and curb the spread of the virus. And some people have argued that in cases like, for instance, with Zimbabwe, with the poor infrastructure, as well as with the lack of information or the slow flow of information, that it could put countries like South Africa at a disadvantage.
Yes, indeed. You know that the relations between South Africa and Zimbabwe are very strong. We have many Zimbabweans traveling between South Africa and Zimbabwe. And, you know, it's going to be a difficult one. And I think South Africa will have to handle its own cases, but also monitor the SADC region because many countries depend on South Africa a lot.
Yeah, and indeed this all happens as South Africa chairs the African Union, and as Khusela Tiko indicated that meetings will be taking place tomorrow to try and consolidate efforts around the spread of the coronavirus. Just over 2,000 cases that have been confirmed so far on the continent, as well as 64 deaths. We've come to the end of this evening's program. Thank you so much for watching. We're back again next week, same time, same place. Enjoy the rest of your week, and remember, please wash your hands and follow orders that are being given by the state to try and contain the spread of the virus. Goodbye.
An absolute decimation on the whole share index.
Stock's feeling an enormous amount of pain. I think a lot of people very concerned.
We already expect the Reserve Bank to act aggressively.
Don't over-pressurize them. Leave the conversation to me and the governor of the South African Reserve Bank.
Meter taxi drivers, you find them a lot when you come out from their arrivals. They say business today particularly has been very bad, and they're very concerned. Stockbells have for a long time been part of South Africa's fabric, and as the world evolves, so do they. But many are moving away from the traditional way of saving, such as cash payouts, burial societies, or buying groceries in bulk. After realizing the power of collective saving, entrepreneur Mutupi Khoba created Puno Stockbell.
So when Mutupi came up with the concept of Puno, to say now he wants to enhance people and understand that, instead of using money recklessly, why not come together and join and become members of Puno and start building an economy for our black people.
New age Stockbells like Puno are prioritizing building wealth for themselves while building businesses that can help the economy.
It's high time as black professionals, as Africans, that we take this Stockbell platform and we use it for business. Because we are saving, it's billions of money that are saved through Stockbells. But this time around, we want to take those billions and turn them around to build an economy, and I call it a parallel economy to the one that we are having.
Their method of saving and meeting has defied a long-standing tradition, opting to use digital tools. Instead of meeting regularly, they do so only once a year. But every month, they use a video calling app which allows all members to participate in real time from anywhere.
And what's nice about it is that it keeps track of who's owing, how far along are you, and it actually gives you reminders when you're falling behind.
These 5 are part of a group of more than 40 other business owners and aspiring entrepreneurs. Each member contributes 840 rands a month over 12 months, or a one-off payment of about 10,000 rand. Together, they've purchased a tissue-making machine that will enable them to be equal shareholders in the business.
We needed to find a business that we can, all of us, work on. And we realized that if we can get a tissue machine, then we can come back and manufacture the tissues. And then each one of us can be a salesperson in selling the tissues. You see, so it's not a business that is going to come and we look for other people who are going to run it. No, the people within are going to be the sales agents. And as they sell the tissues, they also get an incentive from that.
The group boasts diverse professional skill set. Among them is a teacher, an actuarial analyst, a chartered accountant, a lawyer, an entrepreneur and author. They say this enables them to make well-thought-out decisions for the business.
What works for us is that we are multidisciplinaries in our own different things. That helps because when you're looking at a challenge that has to do with legal, there's a lawyer who's an attorney that can say, no, watch out for this. So that's also important to make sure they don't pull in the group people that are thinking the same, people that have the same education or the same experience.
Puno's future plan is to register a cooperative bank, and for this they are looking to attract more members so the group reaches 200 members.